Let's begin our discussion of the slow etude for year E, as we usually do by defining our terms. So we have our tempo marking here, Valse lentement. A valse is just another term for waltz. It's a dance in 3/4 time that you're probably familiar with. If not, just look it up on YouTube or something like that and you'll find good examples. The Tennessee waltz is one that's commonly known in our part of the country that provides a good example. However, you have this other word, lentement, which means slowly. So altogether, this etude should be perhaps a little slower than the typical waltz, but still have the feeling of a dance and at least something of the feeling of being in one, as waltzes typically are. Now, with regard to tempo, your instructions call for a tempo with the quarter note at 70 to 80 beats a minute. And generally speaking, that's correct, though understand that this particular piece should be played with quite a bit of rubato. That means that there will be times when the tempo pushes ahead slightly, say at the front part of a phrase, and then pulls back a little bit at the end of the phrase. Also, while at this slow a tempo, we do normally think in 3 with the quarter note getting the beat, again, there should be at least something of this feeling of being in 1, where there's some extra weight on the downbeat of each bar, so that that waltz feel is maintained. At the same time, subdivision of the beat, or thinking the 8th note pulse, or even the 16th note pulse, is vitally important, maybe even more so in slow pieces than in fast ones. While you would need to have some variation in tempo for expressive effect, subdivision adds an element of consistency of your rhythm and timing, one that helps to ensure that your expressiveness doesn't turn into wrong rhythms. Simply slow down and speed up the subdivisions in your head as needed as you play. Now, happily, most of this particular piece is already subdivided into 8th notes for you, but maintaining awareness of that subdivision when longer notes occur is very important. Fourth, plan and mark your breaths. For the most part, this etude consists of 4 measure phrases, with a breath being appropriate at the end of each one. The only exception to this is between the 2nd and 3rd measures on the 4th line, which is tied across the bar line. There you'll be able to breathe after the dotted 8th note in the 3rd measure if you'd like, and there are a few other places where you might be able to get in a quick breath in the middle of one of the larger phrases. Mark places where you know you need to breathe, even if these seem obvious, and then include some extra breath marks, maybe in parentheses where you don't want to breathe ideally, but you could get a breath if necessary. Planning ahead and marking the places in the score where you will breathe promotes constant phrasing, or consistent phrasing rather, correct breathing, and even helps to fight off the effect of nervousness, which can sometimes cause shallow breaths. If you are accustomed to breathing deeply in the same places every time, you will likely keep doing so in the audition room despite any anxiety you might feel in the moment. Marking breaths also helps you to avoid the problem of skipping a good breathing place because you don't feel like you're out of air right then, but then running out before the next good breathing place. If you have penciled in a breath, it will remind you that you need a breath in that spot, even if you don't feel like you need it right then in the moment. Next, legato articulations require constant airflow. Now, this is true for trombonists who will be using a legato tonguing technique, and for euphonium and tuba players who will be slurring. Most method books teach trombonists to execute legato articulations by tonguing softly. Now, while legato often, but not always, demands a soft tonguing technique, the most important thing in executing legato is that you blow a constant airstream through the passage, as this is what keeps the lips vibrating, the sound continuing to be produced, so that the end of one note is connected to the beginning of the next note. This constant blowing and constant sound requires a quick and well-coordinated slide action to have the best effect, since moving the slide slowly or out of sync with the tongue will cause unwanted smearing. For valve instrument players, removing the tongue is only half the battle when it comes to creating smooth slurs. The air must be constant in order to achieve the best effect there as well. Sixth, observe both written and unwritten dynamic markings. While you have some indication of crescendos and diminuendos, the general pattern of allowing dynamic levels to follow the shape of the musical line will continue even when this is not explicitly marked. For the most part, this means that you'll be able to play a little louder on the highest notes, which will help you to play them a little more easily. By the way, that metric push and pull or rubato that we talked about a few minutes ago will generally follow these same lines. Seventh, using different vowel shapes makes large changes of register easier. While low brass players will typically conceive of playing with an ah or o vowel sound, often moving to a smaller or larger shape will aid in affecting changes of register, particularly those that are large and sudden. For example, moving from an ah to an e vowel will help make the leap to the high A on the third line easier, while conversely, moving to an O, or for tuba players, even an aw, AW vowel, will help the last note to speak better. Don't overthink the use of vowels in playing, though. This is mainly a mind trick to get the body to change oral cavity shapes so that it increases or reduces the airspeed and the rate of vibration of the lips. There's no exact science where certain notes are always assigned to certain vowels, but it is a good way to get the body to do what you need to change registers without overthinking. Next, increase the dynamic range. So another word about dynamics here. The indicated dynamic range is from piano to mezzo forte. That's not a very big change at all. Because there are no more extreme markings, make your piano softer and your mezzo forte louder than you would in a piece where pianissimo, forte, or fortissimo occur. That'll help the musical effect to be noticed even more readily by your listeners. Next, this etude is in concert D minor, which might be unfamiliar to many students, both in sound and in execution. Finding and practicing etudes and scale studies in this and other minor keys will help you to internalize both the desired sound and the fingering patterns required in this piece. The sharps may be particularly surprising. While there's one flat in the key signature in D minor, in concert pitch that is, there's one sharp in the transposed key of E minor for treble clef euphonium. But modification of certain pitches using sharps and naturals is not at all uncommon in this key. Remember in particular that B sharp is the same pitch as C natural, and for treble clef players, the C double sharp is the same as D natural. Finally, never allow any etude, but particularly not a slow etude, quote unquote, to be a mere technical study. The judges will be listening for more than just right notes and rhythms here. Those who win the top seats in the band will be those who play with maturity, conviction, taste, and expression, going above and beyond the indications written on the page. This is true of everything you play in any audition, but the expectation of musicality is perhaps greatest in the slower pieces.